Hey, it's pivotal times. You know the message. We're here to bow before God and stand before men. Listen, I am your host, Pivotal Ourselves, and I'm here today. We have a special guest. You know him. He's the filmmaker, author, speaker, humorist, but you probably know him best from VeggieTales. If you have 12 children like me, it's been a lifesaver. He's also started What's in the Bible. You need to check it out. It's very funny where he says children are not opposed to learning, they're just opposed to boring. So he's also the co-host of the Holy Post podcast. Welcome to the show today, Mr. Phil Vischer. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Happy I can be here.
So glad to have you. We're going to go ahead and jump in. Your work on Race in America, parts 1 and 2, went viral. A couple of million, it just blew up. A couple of celebrities joined the bandwagon and picked it up, and it just went there from there. And it not just hit in the Christian realm, it hit hard in the secular as well. I want to know, and I want to start with taking on this historical narrative, right? What has been the experience that you've had? Why did you pick it up? And what's been the experience?
Well, I was born in the highly diverse state of Iowa and lived there until middle school in the cornfields of Iowa, and had no real conception that anyone else's experience in life in America was different than mine. Moved to the suburbs of Chicago when I was in junior high. Again, a very white suburb of Chicago, going to a largely white school, attending a largely white church, again, having very little idea that other people were having very different experiences than mine. And, did the whole VeggieTales thing, lived in Chicago for a while, but on the white part of Chicago, the north side. So again, this is everything that I know is predictably white. And then we started doing this podcast. And as we started doing a podcast, we were trying to get into cultural issues. And as different race issues started popping up, my brother is the dean of the law school at St. Thomas University in Minneapolis, and he became the dean right about the time of the Philando Castile shooting. And so when that happened, he had there was a protest that shut down I-94 right in downtown Minneapolis in the middle of the night. And it came out in the news that one of the leaders of that protest was one of his law professors, an African-American woman who worked for him, which led to people calling for him to fire her. And instead of doing that, he wrote back to angry, alumni and whoever and said, I'm not going to do that, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to imagine what would have to happen in your life that would make you so upset that you would do what she did. To walk out on an interstate in the middle of the night and shut it down. What would have to happen? Now try to think about your life compared to what she's responding to. My great-grandfather was the first non-denominational radio preacher in America, in Omaha, Nebraska, starting in 1923. He went on the air, and he started a Bible conference in Northwest Iowa in the 1930s that's still happening every year. So my brother and I will teach classes sometimes at that Bible conference. So my brother that year, this was 2016, I believe, the Philando Castile shortly thereafter, said, I'm going to do a 90-minute class in rural Iowa on racial injustice. And so he dove into, he dove into the new Jim Crow. He dove into the color of law. He did the research, and he did this 90-minute presentation. And I had never heard half of that stuff. I never heard 3/4 of that stuff. So I was just blown away. And I came back, and we'd started the podcast by then. So I came back on the podcast and said, my brother just did this thing. It was amazing. I learned so much. And people said, well, tell us about it. So I said, okay, Rob, can I have your slides? I'm going to go through your slides on the podcast. That ended up being our most popular episode we'd ever done. So that was 2017. Then we get to 2020, and now we've got George Floyd back in Minneapolis with my brother again. So my brother is blogging about it because he's got National Guard troops right outside his school front door. So all this stuff is happening. And I see now we have Facebook all over our family. And my family is, I have cousins and nieces and nephews in downtown San Francisco and downtown New York, but also in rural Michigan and rural Iowa. So I'm watching the Facebook chatter during George Floyd, going back and forth. And we're trying to point out this podcast episode, which is 90 minutes long. So would you just listen to this 90-minute? And it's too long. So I said, okay, I got to take that and I got to turn it into something that's Facebook shareable. which turned out to be a 17-minute video. And I thought, just for the people, that don't have time to listen to the podcast episode, I'll just give them this 17-minute video. The podcast episode was listened to like 40,000 times. The Facebook video was watched 7 million times. That's why I got into it, because my eyes were opened. Growing up in Iowa, I didn't know this stuff. And when I learned stuff, I'm a really curious guy. When I learn stuff, I love to tell other people about it. And that's all I thought I was doing. I didn't really think I was jumping into some crazy thing that would label me as woke and, get him out of your church. But I just like this is really interesting. Listen to the stuff that I'm learning. And then all of a sudden, there's eggs flying at my head. It's like, wait, what happened? What? I don't understand.
So that becomes my next question, Phil, was what were the repercussions? Because, for people who have not seen Race in America, you really do go and you're an advocate for all of those things that people of color have been saying all of these years that we could close a deaf ear to because we're victims. We don't know what we're talking about. We're yet again complaining, but you're in a position where you actually raised up many of their children through VeggieTales, and you're a trusted household name. And now you're coming in and now saying, no, they were right. There's a lot that's happening. What was the response from your following?
Some of it was great. Some of it was so encouraging because I had people say, this is the first thing I've seen that I can show to my conservative parents. I got my dad, my Fox News watching dad sat down and watched it and said that made sense. So there was a lot of that, which was really heartening. Some people said, thank you for not politicizing this. But this was also before the George Floyd protests became politicized.
Okay.
So in the first weeks that the video came out, there was a lot of positive response.
Because the ground had been tilled, right?
The ground hadn't been poisoned yet. The ground had been tilled by the video of George Floyd.
That's good.
The ground hadn't been poisoned by, MSNBC picking this narrative and Fox News picking this narrative and then declaring this is what your team has to believe.
One or the other.
Or you're betraying your team.
Correct.
So then it was probably 3 or 4 weeks in that for the first time, somebody, rather than saying, that's an interesting video, said, you're a Marxist.
Correct. Correct. Just had that conversation with a brother in Christ. Let's define, my thing to him was, let's define the roots of Marxism and how everything that's anti what you believe in is now Marxist. How did we get here?
Yes.
Can we pull it apart?
Yeah, there are a lot. It's very hard to pull apart because then I learned the phrase critical race theory, and I'd never heard that phrase before. Oh, what's this? Tell me about this thing that you're saying I'm promoting, because I've never heard of it. And
like Lecrae, the artist, said, he became a poster boy for evangelical right wing, and he was like, wait, before you do that, what is that? And before you know it, you are the poster child for a term that you don't even realize. Right. You're put in a camp.
Then Newsweek ran a story that VeggieTales has become woke, and Phil Vischer is the tip of the spear for woke Christianity.
Come on.
I'm like, wait, what? How did that happen?
Bob the Tomato is woke.
Yes. Yeah. And the first time a couple people said that, hey, you're woke, Phil Vischer. And I thought, oh, that means I'm aware of injustice and I care. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much. But then suddenly people started saying it and I could tell they didn't mean it as a compliment anymore. Right. Like, oh, wait, you're saying that like it's bad.
Right. Let me read. And that's the thing, right, is that these definitions that we don't take the time to sanctify as Christians get placed on us. We end up in camps not knowing how we got there, and we become spokespersons for movements that we had no allegiance to. Our allegiance was to the truth of the gospel. Right. And beyond that, what are you calling me, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I'd never heard of critical race theory. I was not really versed in Marxism when I made these videos. So I didn't. None of that went into the videos. I just read about history and then repeated what I had learned in a shorter, punchier, format, which is basically what I do with the Bible. I read Bible stories and I teach them to kids in shorter, punchier formats. So I'm not making up anything new. Everything that I talked about, I mean, you can Google it. You can find it in Wikipedia. You can find it in books. But something happened where if you believe, one of this list, anything on this list, if you believe anything on this list, it means you're on that team.
Right. That's right.
So people are insulting me for positions that I've never taken.
Oh, I love it.
So you say all black people are victims. Well, wait, go back and watch the video. I never used the word victim. I never used the word Marxist. I never used the word oppressor. I've never used any of these terms that, that are now they're trying to get banned from all public schools because, of course, they come from, that side, which is the devil's side, as opposed to our side, which is God's side.
Correct. So here's the thing, right? Critical race theory is simply saying, before we have this hotbed of all the things that pop up, right? Critical race theory is, in its simplest form, is saying race is not a biological definition. It is not a biological feature. It is one that is constructed to culturally oppress a group, specifically people of color. And the systems that have been developed from that construct are inherently inside of America's systems, whether it's the highway system or it's the way that housing is gentrified. It's inherent in it. No matter what system you touch, there's a piece of it in it. Biblically, we are told that the world system is anti-God. So if we as Christians can simply say it's a world system, it's a result of a fallen world, and take the hotbed off of it, take the stigma out, I think we'll be better for it. What you think?
Definitely. Where we got in trouble in Christianity, conservative Christianity in North America, was in the modernist fundamentalist controversy of the late 1800s, early 1900s, because before then, most conservative white Christians were social reformers and gospel spreaders. They were both. It was very common around the turn of the century to work for societal reform and to share the gospel.
Right.
With the modernist fundamentalist controversy, those two things split up. And the liberal Christians took social justice, and the conservative Christians, the fundamentalists, took the gospel. Say, we're about the gospel. You guys have missed the boat, and you're now you want to reform society, and Jesus is about to come back. So what's the point of that? You're polishing the silver on the Titanic. So, if you want to reform society, you're a liberal. Yeah. If you want to share the gospel, you're a genuine Christian. And that was
and it's even, you're right, because it's even expanded from you're a conservative to you really a Christian.
Yes.
It's a huge issue.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So it's the legacy of fundamentalism. And I'm in that legacy. I'm firmly in that legacy. I'm an evangelical Christian. That's part of the legacy of fundamentalism. Billy Graham and Wheaton College and my great grandfather, so I understand that legacy. But what a lot of us are trying to do now, at least some of us are trying to do very hard, is say the split between improving society and sharing the gospel is artificial. It's not biblical. And we don't but we've spread the two things between MSNBC and Fox News, so we believe they can't possibly coexist in one person.
Right.
And the whole black church says, hello, we've been doing them both since we started because we never had the option not to.
We haven't had the option not to. And so the biblical understanding that God has given me, and those who watch Pivotal Times know, is the understanding of Solomon with the babies. Right, that when he was presented to split the bodies, he said the real mother will stand up. And the Lord gave me the understanding that if we will keep the church one, then and we will refuse to split the body of Christ into left or right wing, then the true Christians will stand up and say we will not be divided. And so that wisdom has to follow us into these times. And we have to be able to say, these 5 things are good. These 5 things are good. Let's put them together. And everything else about both sides has to fall off.
But it means you have to be okay with half of the people on either side being mad at you.
Or more than half.
Because the people on the left are going to say, how can you be pro-life? And the
Correct.
people on the right are going to say, how can you be pro-racial justice? Are you saying there's something wrong that we didn't fix in 1968? I'm pretty sure we fixed everything in 1968. So anything that's still wrong is the fault of the people that are having the problem.
Right,
You
the
know,
victim.
yes, to say, hey, guess what? Sinful people can build sinful systems.
Right.
Is that a shock? Is that a biblical shock that sinful people could build sinful systems and that we should work to try to undo the damage, even if the system technically no longer exists? The after effects of a system can go on for 100 years.
Right, and that is putting it mildly, right? Because as we see in the history, you can't see it, but it does exist. It exists when a young man is pulled over 49 times in 13 years. And on the 49th time is gunned down in front of his family. So we are going to wrap this in segment 1 here. I want to leave us with this. You know, it takes extreme courage in times like these to not be torn between the two groups, because the two groups, one operates to fulfill the purpose of the other. Without one, the other one falls and the money goes with it. The love of money is the root of all evil. In order for them to continue, we have to fill the camp. And so I encourage us as believers to take a stance, a righteous stance that the Lord Jesus would call us to. Jesus Christ came to bring truth and grace. Grace and truth are found in him. And so neither one can be discarded. We're going to end here. Thank you so much for segment 1. I'm looking forward to segment 2, where we look at what should be the role of white America. Should you guys stand up as allies? How do we find some common ground? We're here to talk about it. Listen, we're here to bow before God, to stand upright before men, and to be well. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to you on segment 2.